Hello and welcome to the Commander's Quarters, your Magic the Gathering source that helps you command your budget. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all their support. There's even a brand new Brigadier General tier where you can get a shout out on a Commander's Quarters episode that's dedicated to you. Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander's Quarters studio. Welcome to the show. So the last day of Innistrad Crimson Vow spoiler season continues on, and a lot of exciting cards, well, have been coming out recently, including Aruth Tormented Prophet, which very well might be my favorite new commander from this set. So make sure you check that episode out at some point to see, well, exactly what makes this commander so awesome. Also, make sure you check out my episode on Wash Away, a card that at the very first time I saw it, I was like, well, okay, just nope, that's card not for anyone. And then after realizing one very specific thing, that card is actually really good. So make sure you check out that episode to see what exactly that is. And also from this morning, we've got a brand new detective on the case with Jacob Hawken, and he's saying, Zoinks! Or rare, Aggie. Or, I can't do Velma's Jinkies, so I'm just gonna leave it at that, okay? Make sure you check this episode out on this very exciting new commander. But on this episode, I'm asking the question, guess who's back again? Edgar's back, and he's getting married, apparently. Well, regardless, this channel and this episode is not about the Magic story. So let's jump into this brand new and exciting commander and talk about what cards might work really well with it. So, Edgar Charmed Groom is a 4/4 vampire noble that costs 2 white, black, and it says other vampires you control get +1/+1, and on top of that, when Edgar Charmed Groom dies, oh, so sad, return to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. So, first off, and yes, we'll get to the, old Edgar, here in a bit, and talk about the differences between that one and this one, and power levels and whatnot, but obviously, this is a vampire anthem on a commander and also a death trigger. And obviously, that death trigger is quite important because when it dies, you flip it. And when you flip it, you get Edgar Markov's Coffin. How quaint. Regardless, Edgar Markov's Coffin is a legendary artifact that says, at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 white and black vampire creature token with lifelink and put a bloodline counter on Edgar Markov's Coffin. Then, if there are 3 or more bloodline counters on it, remove those counters and transform it. So obviously then it would flip back into Edgar Charmed Groom, and yeah, you've got, your vampires in play from the Coffin, and now you get an anthem to make them even bigger, and that's basically what this card does. So yeah, essentially you're probably just going to keep flipping back and forth. Your opponent's either going to have to exile Markov when it's a creature, or they're going to have to just destroy the Coffin with, a Vandal Blast or whatever destroy artifact spell. So yeah, overall, Edgar can definitely be more difficult to deal with than, a regular commander that doesn't have the ability to just keep flipping back and forth whenever it dies or whenever it gets enough counters on it to flip back into a creature. So again, the front side of this card obviously can pump your vampire army, and the back side can actually give you a vampire army, or, well, very slowly. But yeah, obviously I can add to the other vampires that you're going to be running in this deck and other effects that you're going to have to create more and more vampires. So it definitely won't surprise you when my recommendation for building around this commander is a vampire tribal deck. So surprising. That being said, there are definitely certain vampires that work very well with Edgar, and yeah, let's jump into some of those cards now. First off, you are definitely going to want to have a lot of sacrifice outlets in this deck, and especially ones that are vampires can be very well impactful because they're also vampires, and yes, in a vampire tribal deck, that obviously can help you out. So make sure you're considering cards like Viscera Seer, Yahenni Undying Partisan, and Indulgent Aristocrat. Viscera Seer has sacrifice a creature, scry 1, so yeah, some fantastic card selection with this. And then Yahenni has haste, and whenever a creature opponent controls dies, put a counter on it, and sacrifice another creature. Yahenni gets indestructible until end of turn. So this one can be really hard to deal with and can get quite big quite quickly. Finally, Indulgent Aristocrat actually, although isn't a free sacrifice outlet, but it is a repeatable one, and one that is quite potent in a vampire deck. It's a 1/1 with lifelink that has pay 2, sacrifice a creature, put a ++1 counter on each vampire you control. So again, with a deck like this that wants to go wide with a bunch of vampires, yeah, by sacrificing creatures, you make them all much deadlier. And of course, and I probably should have started off this entire section with this point, and I'm sorry that I didn't, but the reason that sacrifice outlets can be very impactful in this deck is, well, poor old Edgar Charm Groom, well, you're probably going to want to sacrifice it to actually get some more value out of it. Yeah, turning poor old Edgar into a coffin is probably what you're going to want to do, so yeah, before your upkeep, happens, you sacrifice Edgar, then you get your upkeep trigger, to start making vampires, and eventually you're going to get enough counters on it to flip it back into Edgar to, pump your vampires, and then, when you're done pumping them, you can just sacrifice it again to make it into a coffin again and get more vampires, and you see where this is going. Regardless, outside of actual vampires, of course, there are plenty of fantastic ways to sacrifice your creatures with some free sacrifice outlets in these colors, like Etchings of the Chosen. Okay, that one's not free, but I'll bring that up here in a bit. Fanatical Devotion and Martyr's Cause. Etchings of the Chosen says when enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. So yeah, vampires. Creatures of the Chosen type get +1/+1. Great, another Anthem. And by paying 1, sacrifice a creature of the Chosen type. Target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. So sacrifice, either Edgar, or Edgar again, or one of those creature tokens that you're making to protect one of your key pieces. Speaking of which, Fanatical Devotion is another fantastic way to protect a key piece. Sacrifice a creature, regenerate target creature. And yeah, these effects might seem pretty strange on mono-white enchantments, but yeah, back then apparently mono-white was just like, hey, sacrifice things left and right, why not? Because, yeah, also Martyr's Cause, we've got sacrifice a creature, prevent all damage to a creature or player from one source, so yeah, this can help out in a lot of situations. So being able to sacrifice creatures freely is huge for a deck like this, especially when you're getting extra value. Again, by sacrificing Edgar, you're going to make it into a coffin, which again, just still seems like a very weird thing, and you get to make more and more tokens, and then obviously you can have other effects and other benefits for actually sacrificing creatures. So you're going to be combining some Aristocrat-style synergies along with a Vampire Tribal deck to probably get the most out of this commander. Regardless, outside of our Edgar Coffin, we've got other ways to actually make Vampire tokens. So yeah, some other cards that you might want to consider are cards like Maverin Fane, Dusk Apostle, Call the Bloodline, and Legion's Landing. Maverin Fane says whenever one or more non-token vampires you control attack, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. So yeah, swing away with your creatures and make some tokens. Or you can utilize the cards in your hand to make tokens with something like Call the Bloodline. It has pay 1, discard a card, put a 1/1 black vampire knight creature token with lifelink onto the battlefield, activate this ability only once each turn. So this one does have a limitation, to just once a turn, but essentially with 4 mana and 4 cards discarded, in one trip around the table, you're getting 4 vampires, and again, with an Anthem in play like Edgar, well, you can actually get a good amount of value out of that. A bunch of 2/2s is a lot more powerful than a bunch of 1/1s. And of course, in these colors, you've got access to other fantastic anthems as well. Regardless, next up, there's Legion's Landing, which has, when it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. On top of that, when you attack with 3 or more creatures, you're going to transform Legion's Landing, and it transforms into Adanto, the First Fort. It can either tap for a white, or by paying 2 and a white, you can tap to create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. So yeah, a land that can make you vampires, what's not to like? But of course, we're not done with our vampires just yet. So also make sure you're considering Anthem effects like Legion Lieutenant, which says other vampires you control get ++1. So it's kind of like a mini Edgar that doesn't turn into a coffin. Yeah. Or make sure you're considering Cordial Vampire, which is a really fantastic card. It says whenever it or another creature dies, put a ++1 counter on each vampire you control. Keep in mind, this counts not only your creatures, but every creature, your opponent's creatures as well. So when anything dies, your vampires are going to keep growing and growing and growing and getting absolutely massive. And of course, I have to mention Blood Artist, which of course is a vampire and a fantastic one at that. It says whenever it or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So now whenever creatures are dying or you're sacrificing creatures, you're going to be draining out players, which yes, can get really out of hand really quickly. And speaking of things getting out of hand, let's talk about a top-end vampire at 7 mana with Butcher of Malakir. And yeah, this can be absolutely brutal. Basically a Grave Pact on a creature. Whenever it or another creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So now when you sacrifice Edgar and turn him into a coffin, well, your opponents each have to sacrifice creatures as well, and most likely they won't be turning theirs into coffins unless they've got Edgar on their side too. Yeah. Regardless, yeah, this can be a fantastic way for you to control the board, especially if you've got a lot more creatures than your opponents. Just, sacrifice a ton of yours, with your free sacrifice outlets, wipe your opponent's boards, and probably get even more value again with all your other death triggers, and have fun swinging out and taking out a bunch of opponents. But I do want to bring up one other thing really quick about that coffin and how it can be utilized. So let's quickly talk about a proliferate effect with Karn's Bastion. You might want to consider a card like this. It has pay 4, tap proliferate. You might, want to be able to more easily switch, Edgar back into a creature for that Anthem effect. And if that's the case, well, proliferate can definitely help with that to get you more of those counters on the Coffin to actually flip it quicker. Again, just consideration and not saying that you need to or that you should, but yeah, just something to keep in mind. Regardless, now that we've talked about cards that work well with Edgar, the Coffin Vampire Commander, let's talk about some commanders that might want to utilize Edgar and his Coffin in the 99 of their decks. And the first, and of course the most popular Vampire Tribal Commander out there is other Edgar, Edgar Markov. Now, this Edgar also gives you access to red, and basically is just built around that Eminence, which, you basically never have to cast your commander, and you just get a ton of value. Basically, whenever you cast another vampire, if Edgar Markov is in the command zone on the battlefield, you get a 1/1 black vampire creature token. Yeah, that's an incredibly powerful effect. So, to be honest, I highly doubt many players are actually going to move away from that Edgar to this one, unless they want kind of a more aristocrat-style Vampire Tribal Commander, then they might. And if you've got a really tuned Edgar Markov deck with a bunch of low-to-the-ground vampires, you might not even want this brand new Edgar in the deck because it might just be too slow at 4 mana. Regardless, another commander that actually might want this Edgar is Elenda the Dusk Rose, another Vampire Tribal Commander, or at least it can be. Elenda has, whenever another creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Elenda the Dusk Rose, and whenever Elenda dies, you get X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is Elenda's power. So yeah, she can make you a massive number of vampires, and she also wants to be sacrificed too, so you're going to have some similar cards in that kind of a deck. So yeah, this new Edgar could fit in there, pumping your vampires or giving you more. And actually, let me just kind of blanket statement right here. Obviously, since Edgar is, a vampire anthem, it could pretty much fit in basically any Vampire Tribal deck. So if you've got a deck built around Lucia Sanguine Tribune and it's Vampire Tribal, you might want to consider it. Regardless, I do think that this Edgar is an interesting commander. I mean, it's got to be pretty interesting, right? It literally turns into a Coffin, so yeah, I mean, it can be decently hard to deal with. Obviously, if your opponents, have a way to exile this, like a Path to Exile, or, a way to, destroy the artifact, that's a way too, but it is a pretty hardy commander for the most part. Or at least I should say, it's harder to deal with than most commanders out there. That being said, I do not think that this Edgar is going to draw a lot of Vampire Tribal players away from, well, most definitely not other Edgar unless they're looking to really power down. Because, yeah, first off, you're losing access to red, and you're losing just an amazing Eminence effect. So, yes, I do think that there is a place for this Edgar. I do think players are going to be excited about playing it, but I think it's not going to be, those high-end Vampire Tribal decks that are looking to just absolutely put out a ton of vampires in absolutely no time and take over the game. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again, and have a good one.